I sold my house after 8 years of ownership, and I sold it for the exact same price that I bought it for. I quit my job. To me, money is a representation of my time. You are literally having your time stolen. I just don't understand how more people are not violently offended that that is going on. I went from zero to Bitcoiner probably in the course of like a week or two. I can't stand it when people call it an investment, because it's not an investment at all. It is a new form of money. I feel like I've escaped the matrix mentally, emotionally, physically, and energetically as a Bitcoiner.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Erin to the podcast. Erin is an educator who was born to be a Bitcoiner, a death doula, and founder of Bitcoin Coast Project. Welcome to Bitcoin Edge, Erin.
Thanks a lot, Paula. I'm just so happy to have any opportunity to talk about Bitcoin and to have the chance to connect with you as well.
Well, I'm always looking to chat with women. I get a lot of men guests, and I love to hear Bitcoin from a woman's perspective. And it's only just because often the women say no. So I'm so glad you said yes. And I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and what led you to Bitcoin.
Sure, this could probably take up the whole hour. So I was born in April of 1980, and 40 years later, COVID happened. So everything that happened in that 40-year span obviously led me to this point. But like a lot of people, I came into Bitcoin. I'm Canadian. So we had a lot of restrictions of our freedoms imposed upon us during that time. Prior to 2020, I would say, I was just a normie. I thought capitalism was the problem. I thought cow farts were warming the planet. I really wasn't questioning things outside of the mainstream narrative. COVID was when I really started paying attention to what was actually happening around me, as opposed to what I was being told was happening. So we had gone through the first year of COVID, and then the second wave hit in Canada. So we'd been dealing with this for a year and a half. And after a year and a half, the masks came back. The vaccine passports came into effect here. And that was really the final straw for me. I work in the restaurant industry, so we didn't have any kind of vaccine mandates, but it was going to be part of our job to check people's papers at the door of the restaurant. And that was the absolute straw that broke my back. I just said, there is no way I can participate in this. So I quit my job, and I think it was that same weekend, a guy that I was dating at the time, he knew how I felt about the whole thing, and I was kind of venting my frustrations with government overreach. And he kind of let me go on for a little bit. And then he looked at me and he said, "Have you ever heard of Bitcoin?" And I had actually heard of Bitcoin. I was a regular listener of Joe Rogan's podcast. And back in 2016, I heard Andreas Antonopoulos on the Joe Rogan show. And at that time, I was really interested. I was curious. I was intrigued at what he was talking about. A lot of it seemed to make sense, but I didn't do anything about it. And looking back, I can see what was missing for me was the pain. In 2016, I was a homeowner. I had a full-time job. Things were just going along, and I was doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to be doing. So I really didn't have the motivation, the intrinsic motivation that I needed to explore Bitcoin more fully. And at that time, 2016, the Bitcoin standard hadn't been written yet. There was just, we weren't on podcasts talking about Bitcoin, and it just wasn't easy to find information about it. So that was my first touch point. And then, like I said, 5 years later in 2021, this guy I was dating asked me if I'd heard of Bitcoin. And because I had just quit my job, I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was really blessed in my journey as a Bitcoiner, and I'm still blessed each and every day. But he told me, read the Bitcoin Standard and start listening to What Bitcoin Did with Peter McCormack. So right off the get-go, I was just exposed to, I avoided all that shitcoin. Can I say that word? I avoided all of that crypto noise and I just went right down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And after reading the Bitcoin stand, like that was it. I went from zero to Bitcoiner probably in the course of like a week or two. This guy also, he acted as a bit of a mentor for me in my first couple months. And I thought you had to have a hardware wallet. I didn't even know that you could buy Bitcoin and just keep it on an exchange. I didn't even know that was an option. So I went right into self custody, right into running my own node and just consuming information at, as much as I possibly could, like probably 4 or 5 hours a day. So, and that was 4 years ago. And it's like, I can barely remember my life before Bitcoin. It seems like it's gone by so quickly. And at the same time, it feels like, I was born to be a Bitcoiner. I've always felt the desire to want to change the world, to help people, to help animals, just to help. And I was a yoga teacher for 7 years also. So I was exposed to a lot of yogic philosophy. And I really do believe that it's at least part of my motivation as a human to help ease the suffering of other humans. I believe that's my dharma. And Bitcoin came into my life and it finally gave me the tool to be able to do that. And I felt that that was the piece that was missing in the yogic community and is still missing for a lot of people. I think the majority of people want to help other people. They want to help their communities. They want to help people who aren't in as privileged of a position as they are. But we need the tool, we need the bridge to bridge the idea and the reality. And I think that's where Bitcoin comes in.
And as you know, that's quite a hard bridge to make for some people because to go from Bitcoin to changing the world, that's quite a long, deep rabbit hole to go down. So, why do you think more people don't see the problem?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, especially today with the amount of information that we have coming with us through the internet, through social media, and then people are also trying to live their lives, they're working full time. They're probably working harder than ever because of inflation. They're probably raising children. Like, I just believe that the majority of people simply don't have the bandwidth to go down this rabbit hole like I did. Like, I was in the perfect position having quit my job, but also having a bunch of savings that I could utilize during that time, right? So I think it's bandwidth. And I think also a lot of people, no matter what your financial situation is like, I feel like a lot of people have a very complex relationship with money. Even maybe if you're not aware of the fact that you have anxiety about money, you probably do. Or you grew up in a household where money was always a topic of conversation. I think money is the number one cause of divorce. I think it's an issue for a lot of people. So I feel like a lot of resistance comes in, and money itself is, people don't, Robert Breedlove asks the question, what is money? And a lot of people don't know how to answer that question. I didn't know how to answer that question, right? I just knew that I probably needed more of it, right? Even if I didn't, like, I remember I used to have a salaried position. I was making $80,000 a year, and that was 10 plus years ago. So at that point in time, that was a really decent salary. But I still had anxiety about money. I'd still have things that would come up and go, "Oh, I don't know if I can afford that." And it wasn't something, I mean, I grew up middle class. It wasn't something that we ever worried about, but I still had that anxiety in me. So I think the conversation just scares a lot of people. And I think a lot of people do believe that money is the root of all evil. And if we could just get rid of money, all of the world's problems would be solved. And that's just not the case. So I think it's just a matter of, yeah, connecting with people in a way where, at least for me as a woman, and speaking to a woman, I think it's much more of an emotional connection for us. So if we can connect with somebody on an emotional level about what money is, what it represents, and how it can be better and how it can actually be beneficial, that goes a long way. But people have to be ready to have that conversation. And I think like I said for myself, it's going to take some pain, unfortunately. But pain is a great motivator to change. So,
Yeah, I think you're right about the pain. Some kind of pain often brings people in, and then they often come for number go up. That happened to me. I came because I realized I'm probably not going to be able to save enough for retirement. I started too late, and I never wanted to rely on somebody else. I always wanted to make sure I had it myself and then, share with somebody else, but not rely on somebody else. So, yeah, the pain is a huge motivator, but then it's really important to understand the problem, which is our broken money. You actually sold your house to buy Bitcoin. Tell us about that.
I did, yeah. So I think I was probably motivated by a couple of different things. Definitely discovering Bitcoin was a huge motivating factor. But so I purchased my house back in 2014, and it felt like the right thing to do at the time. And I believe it was the right thing to do. I only lived in it for 3 years, but I owned it for 8 years. So I was a landlord for 5 of those years. And again, just with everything happening during COVID, I just decided I just didn't want to be beholden to the bank. I didn't want any kind of attack vector, whether it was from government censorship, freezing of bank accounts, that whole racket that happened here in Canada. And I wanted to buy more Bitcoin. I first bought in right before the high of the previous cycle, 2 cycles ago, 2021, whenever that was. And the first 2 years I was in Bitcoin, the price just kept going down and down and down and down. My conviction just kept going up and up and up and up and up. So it just felt like the right thing to do. I also decided I wanted to leave Canada for an undetermined amount of time. So I really just wanted that whole responsibility of being a landlord and to not be there anymore. So I sold my house after 8 years of ownership, and I sold it for the exact same price that I bought it for. So I was not one of those people who saw their property value, 10x during COVID, as some people did. But I was still happy that I got back what I paid for it. And, I say that I made about $30,000, although I did not adjust that for inflation. So it was probably significantly less. But yeah, so over the next probably year, I was buying pretty big chunks of Bitcoin with the profits from the sale of my house. And that's it. I'm like 99% into Bitcoin.
That's amazing. Love it. True
Yeah.
Bitcoiner.
Yeah. And so when I sold my house, I bought a camper van and went to the US in my camper van for a year and then decided to come back to Canada in the summer of 23. I wanted to go back to work. I actually wanted to go back to work. I missed the job I was doing and the social aspect, and I missed my community. So I came back, but I still live in my camper van. So, all the money that I make at my job is mine to keep, and it's mine to continue to buy Bitcoin. It's just given me a really simple life. I think Bitcoin clears out a lot of the noise in your life. Living in my van has cleared out a lot of noise in that aspect as well. Like, I really don't own a lot of stuff, but the stuff that I have is important enough for me to hold on to, and what doesn't fit in the van just doesn't come into my life. So it's, along with Bitcoin, it's another great filter for not buying crap you don't need and putting it into Bitcoin instead.
I love that. And because we're such a consumer society, hey there, don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow the channel. Want to sleep easy? MICROSEED lets you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's discreet, precise, and easy to transport. Get yours below. For peace of mind with collaborative custody, the Bitcoin Advisor is a trusted team who can also help with inheritance planning. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. And check out these super cool SATOSHOEs with over 40 styles to choose from. Plus 10% off with my link below. Now, back to the show. I know you said you were born to be a Bitcoiner, and this is obviously one of the reasons. What else are some typical Bitcoin traits that you were born to be?
Well, I think I have a revolutionary spirit. I remember watching documentaries over the years about, the protests over the Vietnam War and just people standing up for things in society that they didn't agree with that weren't right. And there was just always something within me that I just knew that that was the thing. Like that was the thing that I was also here to do. But again, I just, I thought, oh, maybe that's what I'm going to do with teaching yoga, or maybe that's what I'm going to do as a life coach. I was a life coach for a little while and all these different avenues. But when I found Bitcoin, it's like, that's the thing. And I think also I've always been a fairly sovereign individual. That's probably part of my childhood trauma, to be honest. But I heard somebody say just a couple of weeks ago that as you get older, you can actually take your childhood trauma and turn that into your superpower. So I always felt very self reliant as a child, fairly emotionally isolated. And so I was always kind of navigating through the world on my own 2 feet. So the whole sovereign individual thesis, really landed with me, really made a lot of sense. And I had always considered myself to be a fairly independent and empowered individual. And then again, during COVID, that was the chance for me to actually put all of that, everything that I believed about myself, I could actually put that into action. And I actually saw like, okay, I'm not willing to fall in line and do the things that I'm being told to do because I just simply don't agree with them. And I'm willing to accept those consequences, whatever they may be. So again, I think Bitcoin's the ultimate tool for empowerment. And I really feel not indestructible and not invulnerable, but being in Bitcoin and just taking that energy back, like taking back self responsibility, self ownership of your money through Bitcoin. But then how does that translate into the rest of my life, mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically? You really start to just gather your power back into yourself. And it's powerful individuals that create powerful communities. And again, that was a massive disconnect that I saw during COVID because we were being asked to sacrifice our own self, our own beliefs for the sake of your neighbor, for your community. And I just thought, well, that doesn't make any sense because how are we supposed to have strong communities without strong individuals, right? But we were being told that we were being selfish and we were going to kill grandma and all of these crazy things. And I just didn't buy into any of that kind of stuff. So, and I think there's a similar narrative when it comes to money. You're considered selfish or whatever other adjectives you want to put around it if you take control of your wealth and if you actually want to see your wealth grow, if you actually believe capitalism is good, right? Just saying that is enough to make most people look at you sideways like, what kind of terrible person are you? Um,
Well, because then they think that you're a socialist because you don't necessarily think capitalism is good. But that's not really what we're saying. It's more about the fiat system that is causing all of these problems in society. You mentioned credit cards and how they're status symbols. Tell us a little bit about how the fiat system creates a broken society in a way.
it's just crazy. I remember when I paid off my mortgage from selling my house, I went into my online banking and I checked my credit score and it was red. Like it went from green when I had a lot of debt, like, oh, I'd be a great person to give more debt to because look at all the debt I already have. And then when I paid off my mortgage, all of a sudden I'm not a great person. It should be the opposite. So right there, that's a really in my opinion, that's a really easy way for the majority of people to understand, wait a second, that doesn't seem right. Like if I pay off my debts, my credit score should go up, but it's actually the inverse. So that right there, I think is just the perfect example of how broken the entire system is. I remember really wanting an American Express card for, I don't know, for the travel points and all of these like benefits that it gives you. And they wouldn't give me one. And the day that I signed my mortgage, I got an American Express card in the mail. It was like, "Oh, great. You're willing to be a debt slave for the next 30, 40 years? Here's some more debt for you. Like, spend away," you know? Yeah, and just the way that that these metal credit cards have turned into this status symbol. It's like, "Oh, look at all the debt that I can be trusted with." It's like, to me, that just seems absolutely crazy. But again, it's a symptom of the society that we live in because we live in a system that is literally debt based. Of course, if you take on more debt, then you're a good contributor to that entire system being perpetuated.
Yeah, that's very true. As long as you pay it back, you're a good candidate.
That's
And
right.
the other thing that I always think of is the fiat system encourages us to spend and spend. And you talked about that, but I didn't see that before. But because people have so little hope for, if especially if they're young, for buying a house, it's too expensive, so I might as well live for today.
Yeah, I believe that's true, and it's interesting because I don't remember ever explicitly receiving that message, like, "Hey, your money's being devalued, so you better spend it now."
Right.
We're not
Yeah.
turning on the TV and seeing that message or reading that in the newspaper, but there is something inherent, and I kind of think, perhaps it has more to do with the fact that I think most people do know that something is wrong. I think we're living in a epidemic of mental illness, and to me, it's just blatantly apparent. Like, I just watch people. I just watch people walk down the street or walk through the mall or whatever the case. My gym is at the mall, so I get exposure to a lot of people that go to the mall. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but so, like, do they know something is wrong? Are they actually aware that there's something wrong? I don't think so, but I think there is a general sense of dis-ease that permeates all of society. So I think most people are in that trap of like, how can I just ease that pain? How can I make myself feel better? So you go out and you buy a new outfit, or you buy a new pair of shoes, or you go out for dinner, or all of these things that are getting more and more expensive. However, there's that vicious cycle. Well, the more debt you're willing to take on to get those things, the more debt you're given. Yeah, I think until the problem becomes really apparent to people, that it's not greedy corporations, it's not normal for goods and services just to magically get more expensive, year over year. It's actually your dollar that's losing value. And what is it that your dollar represents? And to me, I think that is one of the most important things to, if you're going to explain anything to people, that whole "what is money" question. And to me, money is a representation of my time. And we kind of started off talking about death. Like, we all understand, again, whether it's extrinsic or intrinsic, we all understand that time is our most scarce, most finite asset that we have. So when you present it to somebody in that way, that you are literally having your time stolen, I just don't understand how more people are not violently offended that that is going on. It just, like, it really blows my mind. To me, I mean, I guess because I'm a Bitcoiner, it just seems like such an easy concept to grasp. But maybe, I don't know, again, I think it goes back to that idea of bandwidth and energy, and like, people want things to change. Have you ever seen that meme where it's like, who wants things to change, and everybody puts up their hand, and then he says, who wants to change, and nobody puts up their hand, right? It's
Because that takes work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that whole idea of like, well, if everything that I believed to be true is no longer true, what does that say about me? What does that say about my life? And for most people, I think maybe that's just a really terrifying concept to even take a look at. They would rather just, keep the gaze forward, not take in any crazy ideas, and just live day to day and just try to stay alive.
Yeah. I think you make a really good point that People do know something's wrong. Most people know that prices are going up, like you said. And then understanding money, you're right. Most people don't fully understand money. I didn't either. And I think where there's a disconnect is some of it is normal. They think some of inflation is normal, and this is how it's always been. So it's almost like we have to change our whole mental construct to get Bitcoin, because Bitcoiners know that they printed 40% of the money into existence during COVID. And that is actually devaluing your time and your pay. But even when I say that to people, they still don't quite get it, and they don't see that Bitcoin is there for the solution.
Yeah, yeah, and even, if you say sometimes, I've heard this again in, like, psychology, but if we can't do something for ourselves, are we willing to do something for our children or our children's children? So, again, even saying, like, okay, even if you're not so worried about yourself, like, what kind of future do you want for your children? Like, do you want your children to ever be able to buy a home? Do you want them to have their own babies? Like, all of these things. But again, it's just, yeah, I think we need to keep doing our job as Bitcoiners to have these conversations. I think it's really important. I don't want anybody in my life to ever say, "Well, you never told me that." Like, I literally was on the ground a couple weeks ago begging the people that I work with. We were at a barbecue. I was on the ground with my palms to the earth, and I was like, "I'm begging you, just 1 hour, listen to a podcast, read a book. I implore you to do this." There's a lot of external stimuli, again, like we said, like TikTok, Instagram, X, like all these things, but something needs to motivate you from the inside. So I think it's going to take things getting a lot worse, which is unfortunate, but people know who to come to when things do get worse because I won't stop talking about it. So, yeah, at the end of the day, like, I don't orange pill anybody. Nobody orange pilled me, I orange pilled myself, right? But we do have these touch points that I just think about it as planting a seed for
Yeah,
people.
I love that. And if somebody did come to you, which resources would you use for people who just starting out?
Well, I guess it depends how they like to consume information. So I think that's important to ask. And that's something that I am doing my best, not just to talk at people, but to actually ask them questions. Like, what is it that you're struggling with? Or what is it that what problem do you want to solve in your own life? So I ask people, how do you like to consume information? Are you a reader? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you watch YouTube videos? So again, I often point people towards the two resources that got me there, which is the Bitcoin Standard and What Bitcoin Did. And there's also some really good stuff on YouTube. Lynn Alden did a 30-minute little video of her book Broken Money, which is really great. And God Bless Bitcoin is also one of my favorite documentaries. So again, like, people have to have the attention span to sit through an hour and a half. So there's great creators. Julian Figueroa, Kinetic Finance is a local guy, and he just started a new YouTube channel called The Exit Manual. His goal is to get 1 million people onto Bitcoin in the next 365 days. So he's releasing short form content, like 6 or 7 minutes, what the problem is and how Bitcoin fixes it. So, I mean, there's just so much good stuff that's out there. I just always caution people, you can go ahead and find your own way in, find your own resources, but the second someone starts talking about crypto or any other coin, don't listen to that person. It's a really good filter, I think, for most people.
Yeah. And then we have to get into the difference between crypto and Bitcoin.
I know, and I'm still trying to find my wording on that kind of stuff. It gets more clear every time I explain it, but it's people look at me like I'm a scammer a lot of the time when I start talking about Bitcoin. So I actually had someone say to me, um, this guy, every time I see him, he asks me, how is Bitcoin doing? Of course, he's asking, how is the price doing? So So the last time I saw him, I thought, maybe this guy is actually ready to hear a little bit about Bitcoin. So we got into it a little bit and he said, "You know what?" He said, "The one thing that really bothers me about Bitcoiners is they're always trying to convince me that I should get some, like it's some kind of scam or some kind of Ponzi scheme." And I just thought, isn't that sad? Or it's so indicative of where we are in our humanity that we think that someone who's genuinely trying to help us is trying to scam us. And it's good that people are skeptical because most people are trying to scam you. Let's be honest. But there's just, I feel like Bitcoiners just approach it in such a different way. Like, I never ask people say, "Oh, why don't I just give you my money and you can buy Bitcoin for me?" And I'm just like, that is the exact opposite of what I want to do. Like, I'm just trying to give you the tools to empower yourself to do this, do your own research, do this for yourself. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting journey. And just to mention some other resources that I like, I love The Big Print by Larry Lepard. It's really well written. And of course, you're from Canada, The Price of Tomorrow, but that's not the first book I would read if I was a Bitcoiner, but unless you're much more advanced than me on
yeah,
understanding money.
my book trifecta. So the first 3 books I read The Bitcoin Standard, and then I read Why Bitcoin by Tomer Strolight, which, I mean, after reading The Bitcoin Standard, it's like, okay, I understand the problem with money. I understand enough about Bitcoin to see how it may, I believe now it does, but at the time I thought it may fix the problem. And then when I read Why Bitcoin, it was like this whole other, just this philosophical mind bomb that went off for me. And I think, like I said, my 7 years as a yoga teacher and just kind of exploring the spiritual aspect of life. And Tomer's just such a brilliant Bitcoiner and a brilliant person. Reading that book, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much more than money. And then I read The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. And he doesn't even mention Bitcoin until like the second to last page or something like that. And that just helped me to understand technology, period. Like, I didn't even understand technology. I thought technology was computers or cell phones. I didn't understand that technology is like automobiles, washing machines. Like, over time, humans are always looking for ways to improve our lives, to get more value, and to create more time for ourselves. Think of how much free time a washing machine created for people. And ultimately, circling back to the idea of time, like, that's what Bitcoin does for us. It not only preserves our time, but it gives us our time back. That is just, for the majority of people, more and more and more of that time is being taken. So when you can look at it from that perspective as well, it's like it makes it so much more than a number go up thing. It's so much more than an investment. I can't stand it when people call it an investment because it's not an investment at all. It is a new form of money.
Yeah, and it's a type of money that we can save our energy in that is holding its value, and when measured in US dollars, it's going up in value, but it's at least holding its value, which fiat money is not holding its value. It can't be when you're printing that much.
That's right. Yeah, I remember in Canada, oh my gosh, the government was giving out so much money. I can't remember if it was $2,000 every 2 weeks or $2,000 every month, but we an insane amount of money. And again, at the time, I was not a Bitcoiner. I had no idea, but I had this feeling that we were going to pay this back somehow. And all my friends at work, they were all just, so happy. Oh, all this free money, free money. And I'm going, nothing in this world is free, you guys. We've seen it. I mean, I live in British Columbia and rent has doubled. An avocado is $3. One avocado is $3 at the grocery store. It's like, that's how I judge the value of the dollar. It's like every time I go into the grocery store, if I see the price of an avocado go up, I'm like, yep, there we go. And like, I just can't. I don't know how non-Bitcoiners are doing it, honestly. Like, I spend about $200 on a bag of groceries. I just don't understand how people are
Are
paying
you
their mortgage. Yeah,
are you
like,
also shopping in Whole Foods? I
it's
know,
crazy. It's crazy. I mean, we don't have a Whole Foods where I live, but we do have
healthy food.
outrageously high
Yeah,
grocery prices. Yeah. I was talking about how I live in my camper van, and I was saying, well, I'm much happier to live in my camper van and eat steak than renting an apartment and eating Mr. Noodles. You know, like, there's a choice that I'm happy to make, and so I don't have that anxiety about groceries, and living in a van has a lot to do with it. Yes, a lot of the money I make is mine to keep, but also being a Bitcoiner. Like, life is getting more affordable for me as a Bitcoiner. And again, I do my best to just put that out there for people. Like, that image, you've probably seen it on X, the median price of a house over the last 10 years in US dollars and Bitcoin, and then 5 years later US dollars and Bitcoin. And in US dollars, the price keeps going up and up and up. And in Bitcoin, it keeps going down and down and down. And we understand what that means as Bitcoiners again, but I don't think a lot of people look at that and they go, well, yeah, it's because a Bitcoin now is $100,000. They don't understand, like, why, what an inflationary money versus a deflationary money means, and that life is actually going to get more affordable on a Bitcoin standard. You won't have to work as much as you do now on a Bitcoin standard. It's like, who wouldn't want to voluntarily opt into that system? It's just, again, it's like, it's a no brainer as a Bitcoiner, but I try to remember what my brain was like pre 2020. And I'm not sure that I would have grasped the concept either.
yeah, I agree. But if somebody has read those 3 books you read, then they have a much better chance, and also an open mind. I think you gotta stay curious, open mind. I just have to say I'm so similar to you, and I relate to you so much. I sold my place for Bitcoin. I've been in the health industry. I was a holistic health coach and very into health. I would look at the price of avocados because I eat them every day. But yeah, not most people do. And I wanted to ask you about your health because often people come to Bitcoin and then they find health, but you obviously had your health first and then came to Bitcoin. What else has Bitcoin changed in you?
Everything. You know what? It's like, it's changed a lot of me, but it's ultimately, it has stripped away the things that I held on to that were not me. I've always been into my health. Well, not always, that's not entirely true, but I started running in my early 30s because I was in a horrible relationship and I just needed to get out of the house. So I decided to start running. um, and then I was running like a maniac for 2 or 3 years, and I thought I should probably do something a little bit different. So I started doing yoga, and then I was doing yoga twice a day for 7 years, and then started having shoulder injuries and back issues, and I went for a massage, and my massage therapist said, "You really need to start lifting weights," because my body was just really imbalanced with yoga's a lot of pushing and no pulling. So anyway, things were just getting misaligned. So it just so happened that, a lot of Bitcoiners happen to lift weights. And it's like, okay, I was doing that before, and now I'm doing that with even more intentionality. And I think the main motivating factor for me behind that is, not just lifting weights, but my health in general is, I feel like I've escaped the matrix mentally, emotionally, physically, and energetically as a Bitcoiner. Like, I tell people, like, I'm here, but I'm not really here. And they look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. I don't tell everybody that, only people that, I know pretty well. So the only aspect of that reality that I can't escape is being here physically. So if I am going to be here physically, I'm going to be as physically strong and capable as I can possibly be. I don't want to be a little old lady hunched over a walker and completely dependent on other people, or God forbid the state, when I get old. So that's a major motivating factor for me. And It just so happens again that a lot of Bitcoiners are very into their health. And I think it is that whole idea of sovereignty and empowerment that leads you to those things. So I did used to be plant-based. I wasn't dogmatic about it. That was just the direction that my life went in. My mom has celiac, like her gut is completely destroyed. And just before I became a Bitcoiner, I started noticing I was having some gut issues. And through Bitcoin, I discovered this whole carnivore diet situation and um, did a complete 180 and started just eating meat. All of those gut issues went away. Not saying that that would be the case for everybody, but that was the case for me. And I'm primarily animal based because of that. My spirituality has completely changed. I now have a relationship with God that I never had before. And a big part of that was just acknowledging how blessed I am and how blessed I feel to be a Bitcoiner and just thanking God for Bitcoin. And just having that conversation or having that relationship with him. And that's not a conversation or a relationship I was having at all before that. So I'm still on that journey and I don't know exactly what it means yet. I'm not so much into religion, so to speak. But I am really into God, and I do feel the Holy Spirit. Like when I get to talk to somebody about Bitcoin who is not a Bitcoiner, and I can tell that it clicks for them, that something has landed, like I feel overcome by the Holy Spirit. And that's why I say I was born to be a Bitcoiner. Like that is my indication from God that I am walking in my truth and I'm on my spiritual path. So I'm open every day to, deepening that relationship and figuring out more about what that is. What else has changed? Gosh, my relationship with my has completely changed. As I said, I grew up feeling fairly emotionally isolated and not, I didn't have anything deeply traumatic happen to me. I just grew up in a house where we just didn't really talk about stuff. We didn't really talk about our feelings. We didn't really talk about what was actually going on. Everybody just kind of, we all kind of tippy-toed around one another. Because of that, I moved across the country from my family. Like all my family's in Toronto and I'm on the west coast of British Columbia. And like I put that physical distance in between us where that emotional distance had been. And when I found Bitcoin, I knew my mom would get it. I knew she would get it because she's very mathematically minded. She's always been very much into her finances and she watches like Market Call on BNN or whatever the heck it is, the business network. So I started talking to her about it and I gave her the Bitcoin Standard and gave her these books to read. And anyway, we've been to Bitcoin conferences together now and she listens to the same X spaces that you and I both do every day. And when we talk about Bitcoin and she knows who I am as a person on the inside now. She doesn't just know me as her daughter. I mean, obviously I am, but she knows what I stand for and what I'm here to do. And I think that is something that a lot of children want is for their parents to see them as a person and for children to see their parents as people as well. So, I joke it gives us more to talk about than just the weather or her health problems. We can talk about politics. We can talk about the medical system. We can talk about poisoned food and why she's a celiac. We can talk about all of that stuff because she reads the books and she pays attention a heck of a lot more than most people in her age group do. So I think that's probably the one thing that I'm the most grateful for is how it's brought our relationship not just closer, but it's like evolved our relationship. And she's the person I call to talk to about Bitcoin because I don't have Bitcoiner friends in real life that are as into Bitcoin as I am. Like I have friends that have Bitcoin, but I've always said there's a big difference between having Bitcoin and being a Bitcoiner. I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners out there who don't have Bitcoin, but they have the values of freedom and sovereignty and health and welfare and peace and all of these things, but they don't understand the tool that Bitcoin is that is actually going to help to get us to that place. So,
Wow. Well, that's honestly one of the most beautiful stories I've heard about you and your mom. How incredible that she gets Bitcoin and that brought you together.
yeah, she gets it. She doesn't get it to the level that I get it, but that's something that, that is something, again, that I try to make peace with every day. Like, not every single person is going to have the depth of conviction that I have. Not everybody is going to sell their house and put it all in Bitcoin. And that is something that I just need to be okay with. Like, we're not all built the same way, but my whole point to people is like, look, it's way more risky to not have any than it is to have just a little bit. And if you have just a little bit and you just watch it for a few years and you read a book here and there, maybe, a little bit more, a little bit more. And if and when the impending financial crisis does fall upon us, you won't be completely beholden to whatever nefarious system is going to come to replace the one that we currently have.
It may be good just to get some, as they say.
Just in case it catches on, right? Just in case.
Well, the numbers show it is catching on. The adoption is quicker than the internet, and it is catching on because it makes sense and because of all these things we just spoke about. And I could chat to you for another hour, Erin. We definitely have to chat again because I wanted to ask you about being a death doula. I don't know if you just want to say a little bit about that for our last question about how that is also empowering.
Yeah. Well, first of all, people look at me like, what the heck is a death doula? Just like people used to look at me and say, what the heck is Bitcoin? So most people have heard of a birth doula. So a birth doula is a non-medical professional who is really there to advocate for the mother during the birthing process. So a death doula is virtually the same thing. It's just on the opposite end of life. So I say, like, a birth doula helps somebody in and a death doula helps somebody out. So we are there to advocate for the dying person and also to support caregivers, because a lot of caregivers find themselves in that caregiving situation and not having anybody to lean on or anybody to ask questions of. So a lot of the death doula practice is actually supporting caregivers as well. And I think the thing that I advocate for the most from the death doula perspective is, again, just like Bitcoin, like, we have to look at the truth of what is going on. And the truth is that we all die. And the fact that we spend no time talking about that is crazy. Imagine if you were born and you knew that when you were 20 years old you were going to get on a plane and go to Asia. And for all of those 20 years you never once picked up a book and read about what happens in Asia or what they eat or the language that they like. Oh, it's insane. And not to make this into a COVID thing, but I think that is what was so successful, in air quotes, about COVID was the government preyed on people's fear of death. So when you get people really freaked out about death, they will do just about anything to avoid it, including trading in their time, like giving up on being able to go see family, giving up on being with a loved one in the hospital as they die, like just the most ludicrous things we are willing to give up just to avoid something that is going to happen anyway, right? So it's that acknowledgement of truth, which is also what Bitcoin is. And it's the acknowledgement of the scarcity of time, right? So, how, knowing that we are going to die, how are we going to live? And to me, death and Bitcoin just go hand in hand. People I work with say, oh, like, you're so negative that you talk about death all the time. And it's like, I'm just talking about what's true. There's a huge difference between speaking the truth and being negative about something.
Well, you and I are going to have to talk about that more
Yeah,
for
yeah, that'd be
sure.
great. I would love to.
I really appreciate you coming on today. and tell us where people can find you.
I'm on X and Instagram at Death and Bitcoin.
I love it. Well,
That's it.
thank you.
Thank you, Paula. That was great. I can't believe an hour went by already.